In the summer of 2008, FC Barcelona handed the keys to a 37-year-old man who had never managed a single top-flight game. The football world didn't just doubt the decision, they mocked it. A rookie manager, coaching a broken squad in the most competitive league on earth. Most of the squad was from the club's own academy. It wasn't supposed to work. It had never worked before. And what happened next didn't just change Barcelona. It rewired the entire sport. This is how a team of academy kids conquered the entire football world.
Barcelona, the new champions of Spain, are the new champions of...
To understand why a club worth billions gambled everything on a man who'd spent the previous year coaching in Spain's third division, you need to understand just how bad things had gotten. By the spring of 2008, Barcelona were a mess. Not a charming, lovable underdog mess. A dysfunctional, rotting from the inside mess. The kind where players stop running for each other and start running from the press conferences. Ronaldinho, the man who'd once made the Bernabeu stand and applaud, had checked out. Late nights in Barcelona's clubs had replaced late nights studying opponents. Deco, their midfield general, was feuding with half the squad. Results were sliding. The dressing room had split into factions. Frank Rijkaard, the manager who delivered a Champions League title in 2006, had lost the plot and the locker room in roughly equal measure. Barcelona finished third in La Liga. For a club that considers second place a crisis, third was practically an extinction-level event. The fans were furious. The board was panicking, and Joan Laporta, Barcelona's president, was staring down a decision that would define his entire legacy. He needed a new manager. The safe choice was someone proven, someone with a cabinet full of trophies and a reputation that could survive a bad first season. Jose Mourinho was available. So was Arsene Wenger's assistant. Half of Europe's managerial elite would have taken the call. Laporta called none of them. Instead, he called the skinny guy, coaching Barcelona's reserve team in the third tier of Spanish football. A man whose entire managerial resume consisted of beating teams most people couldn't find on a map. The football world had one collective reaction. You've got to be kidding.
Hey everyone, this video is sponsored by OK Jersey, rated an impressive 4.5 stars on Trustpilot. Fans love them for high-quality jerseys, great prices, only £15, and super fast delivery. They offer a huge selection of new season, retro, and even upcoming World Cup kits. Use code MAUS at checkout to get 8% off your order. Don't wait, go check them out.
But Laporta wasn't picking a manager. He was picking a religion. To understand Guardiola, you have to understand the ghost that haunted every corridor of Camp Nou. A Dutch ghost with a cigarette habit and an opinion about everything. Johan Cruyff didn't just coach Barcelona in the early 1990s. He rebuilt the club's DNA. He created La Masia's modern philosophy. He invented the idea that Barcelona should play a certain way, that winning without style was worse than losing with it. And the skinny midfielder who absorbed every word, the one who sat in the dressing room taking mental notes while his teammates talked about girls and cars, that was Pep. Guardiola had played under Cruyff for years, not just played, studied, worshipped. He was Cruyff's on-pitch extension, the player who understood the system better than anyone else on the field. Positional play, possession as a defensive weapon, pressing the instant you lose the ball, and above everything, courage with the football. Cruyff used to say that playing football is simple, but playing simple football is the hardest thing there is. Guardiola didn't just believe that, he built his entire identity around it. And then there was La Masia, Barcelona's academy. The production line that had been quietly assembling something extraordinary while the first team fell apart. Most clubs looked at their academy and saw a cost center, a nice PR story about developing young talent that really meant selling them to mid-table clubs for a few million. Guardiola looked at La Masia and saw an army. Xavi Hernandez, 28 years old, already written off by half of Spain as too slow for modern football. Guardiola saw the most intelligent passer on the planet. Andres Iniesta, quiet, fragile, perpetually underestimated. Guardiola saw a man who could dribble through 3 defenders while looking like he was taking a walk in the park. Lionel Messi, 20 years old, already brilliant, but deployed as a conventional winger, Guardiola saw something different, something the football world hadn't seen before. Sergio Busquets, playing in the reserves. Unknown, Guardiola promoted him to the first team. People thought he'd lost his mind. Gerard Piqué, a centre-back who'd left Barcelona's academy as a teenager because he couldn't get a game. He'd gone to Manchester United, barely played, and come back with his tail between his legs. Guardiola made him a starter on day 1. These weren't signings, they were bets. And the football establishment thought every single one of them was wrong. Guardiola's first act as Barcelona manager was not a tactical innovation. It was a massacre. Ronaldinho? Sold. Not loaned. Not given a final chance. Sold to AC Milan before the ink on Guardiola's contract was dry. This was a Ballon d'Or winner, a man who'd filled Camp Nou with joy for half a decade. Gone. Deco. Gone. Shipped to Chelsea. Another icon erased. Samuel Eto'o, Barcelona's best striker, was nearly pushed out too. Guardiola wanted him gone. The two men clashed immediately. Eto'o survived, barely, but only because no suitable offer arrived in time. It was like watching someone redecorate a house by setting half of it on fire first. The message was unmistakable. There were no sacred cows, no reputation that protected you. If you didn't fit the system, you were out, and the system was everything. In their place, Guardiola promoted kids. Busquets from the B team, Pedro from the reserves. He built a starting 11, where 7, sometimes 8 players had grown up together in the same academy. Pre-season was chaotic. Barcelona lost their opening league match to Numancia, a team most football fans would need Google to locate. The headlines wrote themselves: too young, too inexperienced, too naive. Barcelona's early season looked like a man trying to teach a symphony to an orchestra that was still unpacking their instruments. But Guardiola wasn't building a team for September. He was building a machine for May. Something shifted around October 2008, and once it shifted, it never shifted back. The system clicked, not gradually, not with polite incremental improvements. It clicked like a lock opening. One day Barcelona were promising, the next day they were terrifying. Xavi became the metronome. Every single attack flowed through him. He didn't beat defenders with pace or power, he beat them with geometry. The ball arrived at his feet, and within one touch, he'd already calculated 4 options. By the time defenders moved to close him down, the ball was gone, 3 passes ahead of where anyone expected it. Iniesta became the ghost, floating between the lines, appearing in spaces that shouldn't have existed. Defenders would mark him, turn around, and find he'd materialized 5 yards away with the ball at his feet. You couldn't foul him because you couldn't touch him. You couldn't mark him because he didn't stay in one place. And Messi. This is where Guardiola did something nobody expected. Pep moved Messi from the right wing to a position that didn't yet have a name. A false 9. A striker who wasn't a striker. A number 10 who played like a 9, but dropped deep like an 8. It broke football's brain. Centre-backs didn't know whether to follow him or hold their line. If they followed, Eto'o or Henry sprinted into the space. If they held, Messi received the ball with 20 yards of grass in front of him, and 20 yards of grass in front of Messi was a death sentence. Behind them all sat Busquets, 20 years old, playing like he'd been in the first team for a decade, intercepting, recycling, protecting. The most boring player to watch if you didn't understand football. The most important player on the pitch, if you did. Barcelona began suffocating opponents, not just beating them, erasing them. Teams would finish matches with 30% possession, and a 1,000-yard stare. It wasn't that they couldn't compete, it was that they couldn't get the ball. Possession wasn't just Barcelona's game plan, it was psychological warfare. After 15 minutes of chasing shadows, the fight left teams. After 30 minutes, the hope left. After 60 minutes, they were just waiting for the final whistle. The football world started using a word for what Barcelona were doing: tiki-taka. Guardiola hated that word. He thought it trivialized his philosophy, reduced something deep and complex to a cute catchphrase. But the world needed a name for what it was seeing, because nobody had seen anything like it before. By the spring of 2009, the question was no longer whether Barcelona were good. The question was whether anyone had ever been this good. They started the trophy run with the Copa del Rey. Barcelona dismantled Athletic Bilbao, 4-1 the final. It was clinical, ruthless, and over before half-time. But the real statement came 3 days earlier. El Clásico, Barcelona versus Real Madrid, at the Bernabeu, the most politically charged fixture in world football. A match where the scoreline isn't just sport, it's a referendum on two cities, two identities, two ways of seeing the world. Barcelona won 6-2. Not 2-1 with a late winner, not 3-2 inches a chaotic thriller. 6-2 at Real Madrid's fortress. In front of 80,000 stunned Madridistas who paid good money to watch their team get surgically dismembered. Messi scored twice, Thierry Henry scored twice, Carles Puyol, a defender, headed one in. And the fourth goal, the Xavi Iniesta connection that sliced through Madrid's entire defence, was the kind of goal that makes you wonder if the other team was even playing the same sport. It was the most symbolic result in modern football. Not just because of the scoreline, because of what it represented. A team of academy kids had walked into the cathedral of their greatest rivals and redecorated it. But Guardiola wasn't finished. There was one more trophy, the big one. The Champions League final, Barcelona versus Manchester United. Sir Alex Ferguson's reigning champions, the best team in England against the best team in Spain. Experience versus innovation, power versus precision. Everyone expected a war. What they got was a clinic. Barcelona controlled 67% of possession. United spent the entire match chasing ghosts. Eto'o scored after 10 minutes, with a finish that was almost casual. Then Messi, all 5'7" of him, rose above Rio Ferdinand and headed home a cross that sealed the trophy. That header, a tiny Argentine, out-jumping one of England's most commanding defenders. It was a visual metaphor for everything Guardiola's Barcelona represented. The small defeating the powerful, intelligence defeating physicality, belief defeating convention. Barcelona had won the treble, the first in Spanish football history. In Pep Guardiola's first season, the academy kids had conquered Europe, and the man everyone said was too young, too inexperienced, too idealistic to manage a top club. He just won everything there was to win. The football world stopped laughing. Real Madrid could not accept what had happened. Not just the treble, not just the 6-2. The very idea that a team of homegrown kids had rendered their Galacticos irrelevant was an existential crisis. So they hired the one man arrogant enough, brilliant enough, and ruthless enough to burn Barcelona's empire to the ground: Jose Mourinho. Fresh off winning the Champions League with Inter Milan by knocking out Guardiola's Barcelona in the semi-finals, he arrived in Madrid with a single, publicly stated mission: destroy the best team on earth. From his first press conference, the temperature changed. Mourinho didn't just want to compete with Barcelona on the pitch, he wanted to destabilize them psychologically. Press conferences became minefields. Every word was a grenade. He questioned referees, questioned Barcelona's integrity, questioned the entire narrative of their dominance. And the football matched the rhetoric. Mourinho's Real Madrid didn't just play against Barcelona, they hunted them. High pressing turned into borderline assault. Tactical fouls became a strategy. Pepe, Sergio Ramos, and the rest of Madrid's backline treated every Clásico like a cage fight. In the spring of 2011, Barcelona and Real Madrid faced each other 4 times in 18 days. La Liga, Copa del Rey final, 2 Champions League semi-final legs, 4 matches that felt less like football and more like a custody battle for the soul of the sport. Ideology versus ideology, control versus counterattack, philosophy versus pragmatism, Cristiano Ronaldo versus Messi, Mourinho versus Guardiola. Red cards flew. Pepe was sent off for a tackle that belonged in a different sport. Mourinho poked the eye of Barcelona's assistant manager, literally, during a match, on camera. The man physically assaulted a coaching staff member, and somehow, it was only the 3rd most talked about moment of the week. It was toxic, it was ugly, it was the greatest rivalry in modern football history, and through all of it, Guardiola's academy kids refused to break. In the Champions League semi-final, Barcelona eliminated Real Madrid. The defining moment came at the Bernabeu, when Messi collected the ball on the halfway line, glided past 4 defenders, and scored a goal that shouldn't have been physically possible. He didn't celebrate, he just stood there, arms out, like a man who transcended the need to prove anything to anyone. Then came Wembley, the 2011 Champions League final, Barcelona versus Manchester United. Again, Sir Alex Ferguson called it the worst night of his managerial career. He later described that Barcelona side as the best team he'd ever faced. This was a man who'd managed football for 40 years. He'd seen everything the sport had to offer, and Guardiola's kids still broke him. Xavi and Iniesta orchestrated a symphony. Messi danced between defensive lines like they were suggestions rather than barriers. Barcelona won 3-1. It could have been 6. That Wembley night was the peak, the absolute summit of what academy football could achieve. A team where 8 of the starting 11 came from the same youth system, playing the most beautiful football anyone had ever seen, on the biggest stage in the sport. But peaks don't last. That's what makes them peaks. The Mourinho rivalry had taken its toll. Not on the results, those stayed elite, but on the human beings producing them. The psychological warfare, the media circus, the relentless pressure of being the best team on earth while someone dedicated their entire existence to destroying you. It wore Guardiola down. In the spring of 2012, Pep Guardiola announced he was leaving Barcelona. 4 seasons, 14 trophies, 2 Champions Leagues, 3 La Liga titles, a revolution in how the entire sport thought about football. And he walked away, not because he'd failed, because the intensity of succeeding at that level, in that environment, against that enemy, had hollowed him out. Here's the thing about Guardiola's Barcelona that separates them from every other great team in history. Most dynasties are remembered for what they won. Guardiola's Barcelona is remembered for what they changed. Every major youth academy in the world restructured their philosophy because of what those La Masia kids proved. Germany rebuilt their entire development system and won the 2014 World Cup, using principles they'd openly copied from Barcelona. Manchester City spent £1 billion trying to recreate it. Spain's national team won 2 European championships and a World Cup with a starting 11 that was essentially Barcelona, plus a few extras. The ideas spread everywhere. Positional play, possession-based pressing, inverted fullbacks, false nines. Every tactical innovation that dominates modern football can be traced back to those 4 years. But here's what matters more than any of that. A club president trusted a rookie. That rookie trusted an academy. That academy trusted a philosophy invented by a Dutchman with a cigarette who believed football should be beautiful. And a group of kids who grew up together, kicking balls on the same training pitches, proved that belief, identity, and courage are worth more than any transfer budget on earth. They didn't just win trophies, they changed the game forever.